Well, in times like this, it's impossible to stay away from weighing in on what's happened, uh, what's going on, and I feel like it's my duty to say a few things about the Paris terror attacks. First off, of course, condolences to those that lost loved ones, friends, acquaintances, partners, and so on. Um, I'm also happy that all 16 of my Facebook friends that are marked as living at this point in Paris or being on being visiting the city, they are all marked safe. They all apparently are fine and unharmed. Um, and I apologize in advance if my views are gonna come off as maybe a bit incoherent, inconsistent. Uh, I also found it impossible to sit down and write it because it's the heat of the moment, it's the emotional roller coaster for probably everybody, and it's much easier to speak out at this point, so I decided to put it in a video statement. Uh, I just want the main thing I want to say is that uh, while I totally understand when people rush into conclusions and into hushed up, seemingly easy solutions, such as, that France and some other European countries, England, Spain, Germany, have let in all these muzzies, as some like to say, all these so-called refugees, and now they are taking it up there, and uh, that you know the solution should be to not let them in, and once they are in, kick them out. Uh, I want to warn against such attitudes. Yes, it's true that the lion's share of most vicious and bloody terrorist attacks in the recent years, probably 15 years at least, have come from Muslim terrorism. And it's most definitely true that today Muslim world, in particular Arab world, which was the originating uh, point for Islam as a religion, as a culture, civilization, one might say, they are infected with this virus uh, very significantly, very severely. Both the Muslim world proper and the Muslim diaspora. It's undeniable. But it's also true that terror as a phenomenon did not originate in Muslim world, unless we go back to the medieval assassins. But then we also would need to go back to ancient Jewish Sicarii and similar movements in many other places, from China to probably ancient Britain, uh, where of course Celts were fighting with Rome. Terror in its modern form actually originated in France during the revolutionary years. This is not, of course, to rub salt into any wounds. It's just a remark aimed at pointing out that while today the sick man, so to say, is Muslim world, previously in similar situations were different worlds, different nations, different cultures, different religions. Um, if you go back to much more recent times, uh, there were times when, for instance, Jewish or Italian diasporas in the United States, in particular, were looked upon with a lot of suspicion. Not in the last term because they were ripe with leftist, anarchist, and other subversive elements, some of whom also engaged in terror, or allegedly engaged in terror. If we take very recent times, Oklahoma City bombing, Breivik, that was what, 4 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. Uh, these are American, European, homegrown terrorists, homegrown criminals and extremists, often white. Uh, Given all this and a lot of other cases, given, when one crazy Jewish ultra-Orthodox man engages in a stabbing attack during gay pride parade, and some people start writing, "all these Jews are murderers." Uh, I don't like, of course, being Jewish myself. I don't like when people write that, and I neither like when people write then that all Muslims or Arabs are murderers when such horrible, vile, vicious attacks happen. So I would like, first and foremost, to ask whoever will hear and see my appeal to refrain from such attitudes, such solutions, suggestions, and such views. Um, Now on to what I think, and again, this is heat of the moment. It's very difficult to think straight and cohesively and in the most logical fashion, but I'll try to come up with a couple thoughts on what I think should be done to stem this wave of terror attacks, in particular from the so-called ISIS, Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. Um, First off, there should be no mercy to people who do this, whether in Syria or Iraq proper or in diaspora. I would even suggest that Europe bring back, and again, not only for Muslim, but for all such sorts of acts and attacks, that they bring back death penalty. That whether your name is, I don't know, Koulibaly or Breivik or any, I don't know, McVeigh, whatever it would be, you deserve death penalty. If you claim to be a patriot of your country and you murder people that didn't do anything to you, just on the premise that they are political piggies or whatever, as Charles Manson and his bunch we used to say, you deserve death penalty. If you come into a new country seeking better life and you stab that country in the back, you deserve death penalty. I can't fathom any other adequate punishment for such acts. Perhaps countries like France, England, United States, Germany could think of ways to raise their self-awareness as great powers, great cultures, as countries ultimately absolutely self-worthy. Most definitely, given the fact that so many people from the rest of the world come there seeking a better life. And that should be reminded. Once in a while, that should be reminded to those people. It is not through the fault of people themselves growing up in a certain environment that they may not hear a lot of good stuff about the society they live in. Moreover, that there is a phenomenon that the better society, the more complaints. That's a normal phenomenon. People are made like that. The more opportunities you have, the more rights you have, the more you want. But it should not be forgotten that you are living in a country that welcomed you with open arms and provided you with those opportunities. And it should never be an option to stab that country in the back, stab its people in the back. So I think some kind of cultural shifts, some kind of political and mental shifts in terms of maybe As uh, flat as it may sound and unflattering as it may sound to some folk, in terms of just elementary patriotism, they could and should take place in quite a few democratic countries. People should remember that, after all, no matter what was the colonial history between France or England and Arab and Muslim worlds or Africa 50, 60 years ago, that colonial history is long gone. We don't have 2 million ethnic French people living in Algeria today. We'll have like 5, if not 10 million Algerians living in France. It's a whole new ball game, and people need to remember that. I also want to note that people that say that, oh, we went during, in particular, President George W. Bush's reign, we went into Iraq and we created this mess. Such people, including even Tony Blair, who went into Iraq together with Bush, they are wrong. First off, we should have gone in back in 91, 92, when there was the best occasion to topple Saddam Hussein. Same with Afghanistan. I believe the international community should have gone in sometime around 94. That could have prevented even the very appearance of Taliban. Just like international community, and in particular United States, probably should have stayed in Europe after World War I, and that could have staved off the rise of Nazism. The answer is not to shield or close ourselves off and give up on huge part of the world called Muslim world, Arab world, counting altogether something like 1.5 billion people. That is not an option because A, it's not a good option, and B, it's not going to work anyway. If you shut yourself down, the enemy will always find a hole in your wall. Great Wall of China never saved China from invasions from up north by people supposedly much less developed than the Chinese. The best defense is offense. The best way to tackle the problem is to tackle it at its very root, to cut out the cancer at its very root. And let me remind you in that respect that ISIS was created by people who were originally members of Saddam Hussein's Sunni-dominated, formerly secular but Sunni-dominated regime. Regime whose ideology essentially was Arab version of National Socialism. Regime that used repeatedly, openly, weapons of mass destruction, both on its own people and on enemy combatants, in particular Iranian ones. Regime that once nearly got its hands on nuclear weapons and was stopped by Israel, which really took pounding from everybody, including its main ally, United States, back in 1981, but history has proven that it did absolutely right thing back then. There is no either or between regimes such as Saddam Hussein's, Muammar Gaddafi's, or Bashar and his father Hafiz Assad's, and these terrorists, whether Sunni, Shiite, any other Muslim painted terrorists. It's not either or, it's not a choice. One leads to another. ISIS was created by members previously of Saddam Hussein's Ba'ath Party, whereas in Syria it took root because of inaction of international community. And of course, it also developed acute, intense hostility towards Western values, Western form of society. It could not possibly not develop that hostility given the nature of their worldview and their form of Islamic religious teaching. Just like, the Bolsheviks could not possibly have not developed similar hostility towards the West, given their totalitarian nature. just like fascism and Nazism could not refrain from that. Every ideology and religion has its mean, totalitarian, murderous strain, and they all need to be tackled. They all need to be fought with, and fought with ruthlessly. Getting back to domestic affairs, I think some people should realize that whether you live in France, England, United States, local law enforcement, local government, local intelligence services, security services are not your main enemies. They, for all their possible mess-ups and mix-ups time to time and abuses, for which you got human rights activists to monitor and protest when they need be, for all that, they are your defenders and your friends. And I think part of the reason why we have not had repetition of anything similar to 9/11, and thankfully even Boston Marathon bombing took only a handful of lives, is that we in America had improved tremendously the work both of the law enforcement and also the work with our local communities in question, those communities from which such threats might come. Clearly, in Europe, the situation is more difficult, and maybe they should learn from United States. It's not often these days that people say that the rest of the world, in particular the rest of developed world, should learn from United States. Well, this is maybe one of such cases. A totally special case is the position of Russia's president, Mr. Putin, and his regime. They're trying to now put on the white robes of oracles of truth and call on unification of the world in combating terror, in particular Islamist terror. Noble thing, nothing to say about it. Noble thing on the surface. Noble thing in general. But I think we should approach their position in this situation in a way we in the West had approached Stalin during World War II. Stalin was one of the main culprits in bringing Nazis to power, in particular through his directive to German communists to refuse to strike a coalition with Social Democrats and centrists, which paved the way for Nazis to come to assume power. And then Stalin and his country took the brunt of the Nazi murder machine. We should fight terror, Islamist terror, perhaps along with Russians, even along with Putin, as if there is never any blemish on Putin's own record. And we should keep Putin accountable for his own actions in Ukraine and in Syria in support of Assad, because again, I repeat, much of this might not be happening. The flow of refugees, among whom there were clearly Trojan horses, terrorist Trojan horses who did this, would not be happening if Moscow during Putin's reign was not sticking up for Assad so heavily these years. We need to keep Mr. Putin accountable and not forget for a single minute what he's done in Crimea and in East Ukraine. We have common enemy in Syria, and we should definitely work together. I have posted a couple weeks ago my own plan. I totally know that not many people will know it, and even fewer will consider it seriously, but it's my duty to speak out, and I spoke out. My plan on how to bring down the violence in Syria, perhaps even by establishing a Christian leader instead of either Shiite or Sunni one. We should, and if something like that can be worked out, and there are indications it can be worked out in Syria, that would be great for everybody. But at the same time, Let's not forget what Putin is doing in other places and how it came to be in Syria too. Let's not forget what Iranian regime is doing, what Iranian regime has done supporting Hezbollah, supporting extremist Shiite forces in Iraq, which are partly responsible for driving away the Sunnis and driving them into ISIS camp. Let's not forget any of that. It would be foolish to forget any of that. Um, this is more or less all I probably wanted to say on the subject of this. Yes, well, one more thing, one more topic, very important. Um, I just before making this clip, I checked on the news. It's been reported that 2 out of 8 terrorists have been identified. One of them apparently came from Syria recently. The other is a born French citizen. Mm, Also, on the same day or a day or two before that, the so-called Jihadi John, a British-born Arab who was a fairly successful businessman but went to fight for ISIS, was apparently killed. At least chances are he was killed in a U.S. strike. Uh, this is a very serious indication that while there is a fight to win, and it probably will be won and hopefully quite soon, against the epicenter of this Islamic terror in Syria and Iraq. But the virus has spread into the bodies that it's been fighting against. And truth is that by far not all ISIS fighters or sympathizers or similar terrorists are either born in the countries where the conflict is going on, the main conflict, or born in communities in diasporas in the democratic countries. Not by no means, not all of them are, say, French Arabs or British or American Arabs or Pakistanis or any like that. Quite a few people that have joined this movement are actually ethnic, if you will, ethnic Europeans. Some are ethnic Africans, if you will. About a month ago, I believe, a talented rapper was killed who also went to fight for ISIS. Several American citizens that were captured fighting for Taliban were either of WASP or of Jewish origin. There are many similar cases in Russia. One guy was half Buratian, and Buryats are related to Mongols. They mostly are Buddhists, and half Russian. He converted to Islam and became a leader of an Islamist terror cell. His name was Said Buryatsky. Russian-speaking people know that name very well. He was killed, I think, 3 years ago. And he by far is not a unique case. This indicates that there is a very serious, getting back to what one of the things I said earlier, that there needs to be a raise in self-awareness and self-pride and identity of the free nations. Because there is a spiritual and cultural crisis of identity. And some people are going astray and stepping on murderous road because they don't see any other adequate path in which they could realize their aspirations, their searches, and so on. And it's most tragic when talented and perspective people are lost to such bad and vicious and evil cause. So not only prevention, not only intelligence needs to be improved. Both sides of the ocean the ways to not only integrate materially but culturally and spiritually, to integrate and appeal to certain strata of society need to be found. Uh, this probably truly concludes what I had to say about these tragic events. I believe that ultimately the freedom will prevail. Uh, I believe and hope that every community, country, religion uh, whose name has been tainted by these acts will clear its name. I hope they take active stands. And once again, condolences to those who lost uh, significant people in these attacks. And congratulations to those who survived, those who didn't uh, suffer, of whom there are many more and will be many more. And this is it. With this having been said, I hope to make it to today's rally at Union Square in New York City, in Manhattan, dedicated to memory and of victims and support of the survivors of these attacks.